How's it going, guys? Today on the channel, I thought we'd talk about the Challenger RT and some of the changes that it's undergone in its 12-year so far model run. How's it going, guys? So today I wanted to make this video for those people who are looking to buy a used Challenger RT but weren't exactly sure what came in what particular model year. For example, maybe this person is looking at a 2014 Challenger RT, but they're not sure if it would be better if they waited and tried to find maybe a used 2016 Challenger RT and what the difference are in features and different things that came about year to year. Just a little bit of info for any of those people that might be shopping around or looking around. Maybe you found a really good deal on a bit of an older Challenger RT and you'd like to get into maybe your first Hemi and you just want to see what the differences are year to year, if it's worth it getting a little bit older Challenger versus maybe something quite a bit newer, and what the differences are. So today we're going to tackle that. Now, having said that, I know for a fact that I am going to miss definitely certain features and maybe certain things that came in particular model years. As we all know, every car kind of has their own quirks. I'm sure different model years have their own quirks. My 2009 has quite a few weird little quirks that I'm pretty sure nobody else who doesn't have a 2009 know about the weird quirks that I have with my car. So if you guys know that there's something in there that I missed, feel free to comment it down below so that we have the information for people to see. Just add more information to the pile. Keep the information flowing. Anyways, guys, let's get into it. 2009. I was in love with the Challenger in 2008 when Dodge decided to bring it back. I remember seeing it on Car and Driver TV back in the day. Definitely not on the internet or on YouTube. YouTube wasn't really a huge thing. Definitely not for like car reviews and stuff really way back in the day. I remember going to, in 2007, I think it was, we went to Barrett-Jackson and they had a Challenger kind of prototype there. It was a little different than what the Challenger ended up being later on. But I thought it was absolutely unreal, and I thought it was super cool that Dodge was bringing it back. Now, the styling of these early Challengers was obviously styled specifically after the 1970 Challenger, as you all know, obviously, and they did a killer job of almost a tribute to that car in these newer generation cars. So fast forward a couple of years to 2009, the first year that the full lineup of Challengers gets released. I know in 2008, the Challenger obviously was the inaugural year of this third generation of Challenger, but the only one that was available was an automatic and an SRT8 in a couple colors, and there was a very limited production just kind of to get it out there as the first year. And then in 2009, that's when the SXT or the SE, sorry, as it was back then, and the RT came about. The different trim levels came out and the full lineup of Challenger was finally released. And so before I get into 2009 and the start of the Challenger RT, I just want to talk about what the automotive landscape was back in 2009, because it was drastically different than it is right now. I mean, right now, it's amazing. Like, we are in literally the muscle car era, in like the crazy performance car era, like we've never seen before. I know everybody idolizes the 70s, and they were extremely cool in the late 60s, early 70s, but they do not compare to today. Today, performance is unreal, but it wasn't always like this. Back in 2009, there was no such thing as the Camaro. The Camaro was dead. Last had been produced in 2002. Chevy wouldn't come out with a Camaro for another year. In 2010, they'd finally bring it back. But at the time, 2008, 2009, when the Challenger came out, there's no Camaro. Pontiac's dead. The G8 isn't a thing, and it didn't really take off. It's kind of would have been a competitor sort of to the Charger. That's gone. The GTO, which, I mean, in Canada, we didn't even get the GTO. and it didn't exactly set the world on fire when it came out anyways. That was gone. So that other kind of competitor to that market was completely gone. Performance was in a real weird spot. Very transitional spot. The Mustang was pretty much the only one holding down the fort at the time before the Challenger came out. And at that time, they had their retro styling, which was fairly fresh back in 2009. It had only been back for a couple of years with the retro style. And they, at the time, had a 4.6 liter overhead cam V8 making 300 horsepower. Sounds kind of crappy now because our V6 3.6 that is in the base model Challenger has more power than the V8 GT Mustang did back in the day. But back then, that at the time was one of the more powerful GT Mustangs that came out. The generation before it had the 4.6 that only had 260 horsepower. Things were kind of in a weird spot. If you were in the market for a really cool performance car at the time, you didn't have a ton of stuff to shop for. Things were kind of bland and in a very weird transitional period. So cue the 2009 Challenger. So I remember as soon as the 2009 5.7 liter RT trim level came out, immediately I went down to my local Dodge dealership and started bargaining for the car that I have owned since 2009. Manual, black, leather, sunroof, everything that I wanted in a car, and of course the 5.7 liter Hemi. The 6.1 Hemi was really sweet, but I remember at the time it was like pretty much right in the infancy of the Challenger coming out. Dealerships were trying to gouge the hell out of everybody that walked into a dealership trying to ask for a brand new Hemi powered Challenger. So I remember when I first took my car home from the dealership, it was strange. There was definitely something special about the car. People would be walking down the sidewalk and just completely stop what they're doing and turn around and stare at you the entire way that you would drive by. I would park my car somewhere to go and run some errands. I would come out and I would have a group of people around the car checking out, trying to see the interior, ask me questions about the car. It was so new back then. There was not pretty much any of them on the road, and it got a lot of attention from people. It was definitely a special car. Throughout the Challenger RT's life cycle, it has been powered by the same 5.7 liter Hemi. They rated the automatics at 372 horsepower and 401 pound-feet of torque. The manuals, they rated at 376 horsepower and 410 pound-feet of torque, but we'll just call it around 375 horsepower for the 5.7 Hemi. You all know this though. Now they were both pretty much the same engine, the only difference being the 6-speed manual obviously does not have MDS, and it makes sense when you think about it because it is hard to deactivate cylinders when it can't predict how the car is going to shift because you are shifting the car. So that feature is completely absent in the 6-speed manuals. And the compression ratio in the 5.7 Hemi is 10.5 to 1. Now the diameter of the exhaust piping in all the RT Challengers of 2009 was 2.5 inches, and the suspension was fairly soft. It was a comfortable ride, but definitely not even close to as well handling as some of the later model years of the RT lineup. So the automatic offered in 2009 for these cars was a 5-speed auto with 306 gears in the back, and for the automatics, they were an open differential. Whether you got them with a track pack or not, you still got an open differential with them. If you got the manual, the 6-speed manual transmission, you got 392 gears in the back. It's funny because my brochure from Dodge from 2009 says 391 gears in one part of the brochure, and then in another part of it near the end it says 392 gears. Probably a typo, either that or Dodge couldn't make up their mind. We'll just call them 392 gears. All manuals came with 392 gears and a limited slip differential in the back. That's whether you got the track pack or not. Now, some people really didn't like the interior of the earlier Challengers. They felt like they were too boring, kind of too generic, maybe a bit too much plastic. And to be honest, if you listen to any automotive journalist, they would tell you that no Challenger ever has had a good interior. They all suck. Even the updated version they were complaining about. So you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt a little bit too. But I do have to agree that the earlier Challengers are very, very basic in their layout. 2009 had some weird quirks that kind of almost make you think like the car was rushed out before it was completely ready for production. One of these weird quirks is a driver's seat that does not have a quick fold down option, a quick fold down latch so that people can easily get in and out of the back seat on the driver's side. The other thing that is really strange about the 2009 model year, the earlier production models, mine in particular, is the tack. It seems like it was just a totally generic tack that Chrysler had kicking around in their parts bin that they threw into the car. They didn't even have a red line for it. I've got a tachometer in the car with no red line for a 6-speed manual car. Super, super strange. You think, especially with a manual car, you'd want to know where that red line was so that you could not bounce it off the rev limiter. But another weird quirk of the 2009 model year. Now, honestly, I've got to say I really actually like the earlier Challengers interiors. They check all the boxes for me. Number one, the interior has got to be black or at least very, very dark, because you do not feel badass driving around in an awesome muscle car in a light gray or tan interior. It's got to be black or dark. 2, it's got to have really, really comfortable leather seats. And 3, it's got to have nice, soft areas for you to put your arms. Pretty much everywhere that you touch has to be a nice, comfortable spot. And in the Challenger, they all are. So the one thing that is kind of weird, in this era, Dodge seems like they had yet to figure out their own branding, which I'm, of course, referring to the Dodge Ram emblems all over not only the early 2009 and 2010 Challengers, but literally their entire lineup. If you bought like a Dodge Nitro or an SXT or anything like that, they all had the little Ram logo, even the Dodge Grand Caravan. It was like they didn't really get their own branding. Like, don't get me wrong, the Ram logo is super, super cool, and I completely identify with a Ram as it is my spirit animal. But it seems a little bit weird on a Dodge product as opposed to a Ram pickup. Like the Ram pickup, I get it. That is the symbol of that truck, which is super cool. But on a Challenger, it doesn't really fit. The red double stripe racing logo that they came out with in 2015 was actually really awesome. Dodge finally nailed it, and they finally got that, hey, we've got to have our own logo and our own branding on our own division. So now that we've covered the basics of how the Challenger started out, let's take a look at some of the changes that came up year to year throughout the model line. 2011 saw the introduction of a updated steering wheel. Finally, they got rid of the Ram design and kind of the 4-spoke steering wheel and replaced it with kind of a 3, 9, and 6 o'clock sort of design. They still didn't quite have the newer dual racing stripe design, but they did have a cool updated sort of Dodge logo in the middle, realizing that, hey, maybe we should brand our car the way it should be under its own division. 2011 also saw the introduction of the RT Classic package, which basically got you some cool retro sort of looking wheels that were kind of off that Krager sort of design, and some cool retro style graphics, as well as hood scoops that were actually functional on the RT level. The SRT, they were always functional. The RT Classic was the first time it was functional on the RT lineup, and that was basically just to bring cool air into the engine, just to cool it off, not for induction. Dodge finally got rid of all the Ram logos and updated the suspension finally, so it handled a little bit more precise than 2009 and 2010 models. Also, it was the first time that the shaker setup had come back out, which was of course a throwback to the old Dodge Challenger shakers and Dodge Barracudas with the Hemi shakers. Super, super cool. The shaker system is awesome. I have a shaker hood scoop on my 1981 Trans Am, the old Smokey and the Bandit style. And I gotta say, they are super awesome. Even though they may not add a ton of performance, It really is wicked just watching it sit there and shake and twitch every time you touch the gas pedal. It's super, super fun to drive with. It just kind of adds to the driving experience of the car. Love the shaker package. In 2015, the Challenger got the biggest update in its production run. The interior got a major update with some really cool looking gauges that were kind of retro, but at the same time kind of modern. They really kind of knocked it out of the park with these gauges. Super, super cool. And a revamped control layout and center console. 2015 was also the year that they kind of got away from the standard sort of leather seats and started moving towards an Alcantara and kind of grippier, suedeier style leather. I'm kind of torn on it. I kind of like the look of the original leather a little bit better, but at the same time, the grippiness of that Alcantara and you know, suede style leather when you're in the corners holds you in the seat so much better. So there's that. Either way though, those seats look absolutely killer and are super, super comfy. The updated steering wheel and new Dodge logo came in 2015. Really a huge fan of this. I'm super jealous of you guys that have the steering wheel because it actually looks really badass and the logo is the perfect Dodge logo in my opinion. 2015 also saw the introduction of the 8-speed transmission, which is an amazing automatic transmission. If you are going to have an automatic transmission in a car and not save the manuals like we've talked about frequently, the 8-speed automatic is a killer way to go. Those transmissions shift so hard and they seem like they always have you right in the power band. The first time I drove a Scat Pack with the 8-speed automatic, I was immediately impressed, like drastically impressed. I was not expecting the car to pull as hard as it did, and part of the reason it did is because the transmission just puts you in the sweet spot for every single shift. Really killer transmission, a big upgrade over the old 5-speed for sure. The cool thing about those 8-speed transmissions too is it really did help the performance pretty dramatically for the RT lineup. Probably knocked a couple tenths off your quarter mile time for sure, and a couple tenths off your 0 to 60. A lot of guys with 2015 Challenger RTs reported being able to keep up fairly evenly with the older model SRT8 6.1 liter Hemis with the 5-speed automatics. So that gives you an idea of how much of an advantage that transmission kind of gives to you. Now 2015 was also the year that Dodge decided to say F you to the aftermarket and decided to lock everybody out of their PCMs. So tuning these cars became extremely difficult. If you have a 2015 and up car and you are looking at doing modifications to it, you are going to have to get an aftermarket PCM, which you can then program properly and tune your car for your new modifications. I remember when the 2015s first came out and guys were buying them and then immediately realized that they were having a problem with being able to tune them. There was a lot of really angry guys on the forums that were really mad at Dodge at the time, saying, man, what in the heck is going on? We have these super cool cars that we are not going to be able to add any performance to or customize at all. There was a lot of guys that were pretty upset about it before the aftermarket thankfully came up with a workaround, and Diablo Sport and all the tuners, HB tuners, all you guys, thank you so much for coming up with that workaround. We owe you big time. So in 2017, another cool thing that happened was Dodge offered active exhaust in the RT range for the first time. It was available in the 392 before that, but 2017 was the year that the active exhaust was available in the RT with the 5.7 Hemi. Super cool, adds a little bit less restriction to the flow. You definitely probably see a little bit of gain from this, especially after a few modifications are done to your Challenger, so it's pushing out a little bit more horsepower and wants that freer flowing exhaust. This increased the exhaust diameter size to 2 3/4 inch piping, up from the 2.5 inch piping that the older Challenger RTs had. So this gave you a little bit better flow for sure, and definitely a lot better, more aggressive sound when that active exhaust was engaged. 2019 was also the year that the hood changed up for the base model Challenger RT. Instead of going from what it had up until that point, the 2 hood scoops about halfway up on the hood on either side, they changed it to the 1 central scoop, more forward, kind of like the Hellcat hood, the original Hellcat hood. As the Hellcat went to the dual nostril type, the RT and Scat Pack kind of got that central air scoop kind of look from 2019 on. So throughout the years of the Challenger, Dodge also included some performance packages. So if you're looking at a Challenger that has a Super Track Pack, that basically adds some performance suspension, a little bit stiffer suspension, also better steering and some bigger brakes. And also they did offer a TA package. I didn't include that in this video really, simply because the TA isn't really an RT anymore, whereas the shaker is kind of the RT shaker package. The TA is just kind of its own little thing. It's just the TA package. But basically that gave you a scoop and a cool free-flowing air intake that was actually pretty sweet. That was really the main difference between them, other than the graphics and seat emblems, of course. But that about covers the differences throughout the years of Challenger. I've got to say, don't shy away from the earlier model Challengers if you got a really good deal on one and you're really considering one. They are great cars. The newer cars do handle better right out of the box, but a couple of upgrades, maybe a lower entry price point, and it has its pluses and minuses too. Either way, they are really cool cars. I also wouldn't be super shy about getting into one of the cars that's got the 5-speed auto. With a trans tune, that 5-speed auto can also kick a lot of butt. So although it might not be as wild as the newer 8-speed, it still is a pretty decent transmission that can handle a lot of power that you throw at it. Throw a trans tune on it and you're probably not going to have too many complaints about how that 5-speed transmission is going to run. Regardless, at least that gives you guys the info on the changes that happen year to year. So if you are out there and you're shopping for a used car, you have the info with you, so you know what your car came with and what the differences were, maybe even a couple years newer or older from the car that you're looking at. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed the episode. If you haven't yet, please click the subscribe button, maybe give the video a like, and we'll see you guys later. Cheers.